Hi, welcome to my video on dividing a trinomial by a binomial. Trinomial by a binomial. Trinomial is 3 terms, polynomial of 3 terms. A binomial is 2 terms when they're simplified. Examples. Find the quotient and the remainder of each. The quotient is the answer to the division and the remainder is what's left over. Let's divide these. Long division. So we have an x plus 2 divided into x squared plus 3x plus 1. So notice it's written down as x squared plus 3x plus 1 over x plus 2. Same thing. Same idea as a fraction. So we take the x and divide into the x squared and we get x. So we put the x above like terms, above the 3x. We multiply back x times x, x squared. X times plus 2, plus 2x. Draw a line because we're going to subtract. When we subtract, we change the plus to a minus, and we change the plus to a minus. So now we're looking at the negative 1 that's here. So 1 and a negative 1 cancels out. So you know you got it done right if the first terms are the same and they're canceling out. So x times 2 is 2x, that's done. So let's continue. And we have positive 3, subtract 2 is 1x. Then we bring down the 1. So x into x goes once, so plus 1, that's a plus there. So we need a plus or a minus right here sign. And so 1 times x is x, and 1 times 2 is 2. Draw a line, and we're going to subtract. That's a plus, so we change it to a minus. And that's a plus, so we change it to a minus. Remember, by changing these, we're doing the opposite automatically. Now we add these up, they'll cancel. And 1 subtract 2 is negative 1. So our quotient, I'm going to call it quotient Q. Quotient is the answer to the division, which is x plus 1. And our remainder is the negative 1. Let's continue. B. So we have x minus 3 being divided into x squared minus 4x minus 5. X squared minus 4x minus 5. Divide x into x squared and we get an x, so we put it above the x term. Multiply back, x times x is x squared. X times negative 3, negative 3x. Now we subtract, so that's a plus, we make it a minus. And that's a minus, we make it a plus, because we're adding on the opposite. So now we got a plus 1, minus 1, they cancel out. Negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. And there's the negative, the 1 is understood. Bring down your negative 5. X into negative x is negative 1. Multiply back, negative 1 times x is negative x. Negative 1 times negative 3 is plus 3. And because we know this is the same, so that negative becomes a positive, and that positive becomes a negative. So now we can ignore the negative, ignore the positive. Negative 1, add on 1, cancels out. Negative 5, subtract or add on negative 3 is a negative 8. So the quotient is the x minus 1, and the remainder r is the negative 8. C, we have a 2x minus 1 being divided into 4x squared minus 8x minus 1. Or subtract 1, whatever you want. Now we divide, notice they're in descending order. All of these are x squared, x constant, x and a constant. They're all in descending order, so we have no worries. If they're not in descending order, you won't be able to divide it, so they have to be in descending order. So 2x into 4x squared is a 2x. 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2x times negative 1 is negative 2x. Draw a line, we're going to subtract. That's a subtraction. Sorry, that's a plus, so we make it a subtraction. That's a minus, we make it a plus. And I'm putting circles around when I change the signs. So 4, negative 4, 0. Negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6x. Bring down your negative 1. 2x into negative 6 is a negative 3. Notice the x is above the x and the constant term is above the constant term. Multiply back. Negative 3 times 2x is negative 6x. Negative 3 times negative 1 is plus 3. Draw a line. We're going to subtract. Notice negative 6 and negative 6x and negative 6x will cancel out because this negative becomes a positive. So negative 6 and they cancel. This plus 3 becomes a negative. Now, what I do, I didn't do it then. I change the signs here first. I make that a plus and I make that a minus, and then I add them up. Be consistent. Change all these signs first in these circles. Negative 1 subtract 3 is negative 4. So my quotient is my answer is 2x minus 3, and my remainder, put it right here, is negative 4. So I could put an equal sign between those if I want. Don't make any difference as long as you don't get confused. The quotient is x plus 1. The remainder, make an equal sign, is negative 1. And D. Now, what do I have? I notice that I have to simplify this before I divide, because if I don't, I got a negative 8x squared, add on 12. Okay, and that's in descending order. This is not in descending order, so the x goes first, the negative 3 goes second. And when I move these, notice I don't change the signs. That plus x, that's a plus there, and that's a minus. Now, when I divide, I have to remember that this is x minus 3 divided into, and notice now that this is a negative 8x squared. Notice that I do not have an x term, so that means I got to put a 0x. That I'll explain that more on the next page or over further. So if you don't fill this in with the missing term, you won't do it right. So I have, because the x is missing here, I fill that in with a 0x. So now there's a x squared, an x to the 1, and a constant. Perfect. Divide. X into negative 8x is negative 8. Or sorry, x into negative 8x squared is negative 8. Notice the x goes above the x. Multiply back. Negative 8x squared plus 24x. Negative 8x times x. Negative 8x times negative 3. Draw a line. Subtract. So that negative becomes a positive. So negative 8 plus 8 is 0. That positive becomes a negative, and I get a negative 24. Because that's a 0, 0 subtract 24 is negative 24. Bring down to 12. So x into negative 24, x is negative 24. Multiply back, and I get a negative 24x. And I get a positive 24 times 3 is 72. Now I change my signs, and negative becomes a positive, and that positive becomes a negative. Change your signs. That gives you 0 when you add. Negative 24 plus 24 is 0. 12 subtract 72 is negative 60. So your quotient is negative 8x minus 24. And your remainder is negative 60. Okay, that's some examples. Notice how I did them. Follow it very closely. Same as if you're dividing whole numbers, like dividing 11 into 456. You're doing the same strategy. You're dividing, multiplying back, and subtracting, etc., etc. Find the quotient and the remainder of each. So this is a practice now. Practice means pause your video and work the 40s out to see if you're going to work them out right. Here we go. First one, x plus 2 is divided into x squared plus 6x plus 8. And we divide. X into x squared is x, so the x goes above the x. So x times x is x squared, and x times 2 is plus 2x. Draw a line, subtract. Positive becomes a negative. Positive becomes a negative. So that's a positive and a negative. They cancel out. And 6 subtract 2 is 4x. When you add or subtract like terms, you got to keep the literal coefficient. Bring down your 8 plus 8. X into 4x goes plus 4. Multiply back, and you get 4x plus 8. Draw a line. That's a plus, we make it a minus, and that's a plus, we make it a minus. So plus 4 minus 4 is 0. Plus 8 minus 8 is 0, so that's a 0 remainder. So the quotient is x plus 4, and the remainder is 0. And number 2, we have x minus 3 divided into x squared plus 5x minus 1. X into x squared goes x. Put it above the x. X times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is like doing the distributive property. X is being distributed to the two of these numbers. Draw a line. Then positive becomes a negative, and the negative becomes a positive because we're adding on the opposites. So negative 1 plus 1 cancels out. Plus 5 plus 3 is 8. Bring down your negative 1 after you subtract, after you add. I added on the opposite, so I'm really adding these up. So that's 5, add on 3 is 8. Because I added on the opposite, now I can add. That's, again, just a little reminder, just remind you of this, that's a 5, subtract negative 3. Because you're subtracting, so that's 5, double negative is a positive. So that gives you the 8. So that's 5, subtract negative 3, there it is, which is a plus. So that's why when you change this negative 3 to a positive, you're dealing with the positive 5 and the positive 3 being added up. Change your sign, and then you don't have to think about it this way. X into 8x is plus 8. Multiply back, 8 times x, 8x. And 8 times negative 3 is negative 24. Draw a line. You make your positive into a negative, change your sign. Negative into positive, change your sign. A positive 8 and a negative 8 cancels out. And negative 1 plus 24 is 23. So my quotient is x plus 8 on top, and my remainder is at the bottom, which is 23. Number 3, do I have descending order? Yes. Everything is okay. Do I have descending order? Yes. So that's a negative 7x plus 2 and a negative 14x squared minus 17x plus 2. Written down okay. Got to be careful. So easy to make a mistake. Now we divide negative 7x into negative 14. So that's x squared. So that's a 2x. 2x times negative 14, negative 7x is negative 14x squared. 2x times 2 is a plus 4x. Draw a line. Because I'm subtracting, I'm going to make that negative into a positive, and that positive into a negative. Some people can rub these signs out and make that a plus and make that a minus. You can do that, but I prefer to put them on the top. So when I look back to make change, to see where I went wrong, I can say, did I change that negative to a positive? Did I change that positive to a negative? Okay, now I can see I made a change. So they cancel out. Negative 17 subtract 4 is negative 21. Bring down your 2 plus 2. Negative 7x into negative 21x is a plus 3. Multiply back. 3 times negative 7x, negative 21x. And 3 times 2 is 6, plus, and negative becomes a positive. Positive becomes a negative. And negative 21 plus 21 cancels out. And that's a plus 2 minus 6, which is a negative 4. So your quotient is at the top, 2x plus 3, and your remainder is at the bottom, negative 4. Okay, number 4, here we go. So I'm going to divide But when I look at this one, I see that it's not in descending order, so I'll write that as negative 3x minus 1. So we change the order when you put it here. So when I'm writing this one down, that's not in descending order. So the x squared got to go first, then the x got to go second, and then the constant got to go on the right. The constant is always on the right. Again, a little reminder, 8 is the same as 8x to the 0, because x to the 0 is a 1. So 8 times 1 is 8. So this constant 8 has x to the 0 power, and x to the 0 power is the 1. So that's why constant is on the right all the time. Let's divide. Negative 3x into 15x gives me a negative 5x. Negative into positive is negative. Multiply back. 15x squared. Notice, I know I have it done right if I get the same term here, top and bottom. Negative 5x times negative 1 is a positive 5x. Change your positive to a negative. Change your positive to a negative. So positive 15, negative 15 cancels out my terms because it gets 0. That's a negative 1 and a negative 5. That's a negative 6. Remember, I'm looking at the negative 5 here and the negative 1. Bring down your 8 plus 8. Negative 3 into negative 6 is a plus 2. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Draw a line. I change my negative to a positive and my negative to a positive. Now I'm looking at negative 6 and plus 6. They cancel out. I'm looking at a plus 8 and a plus 2. That's a 10. And my quotient is negative 5x plus 2. And my remainder is 10. Quotient on top, remainder is on the bottom. Let's continue. Now, before, a while back there, I put one in where I had to put in a missing term of 0. So let's explain that more. Notice I have an x squared, but there's no x. So that means if there's no x, there's a 0x plus 3. So x squared, there's an x, and it's constant. Because there's no x in this one, it's understood to be 0x. 0 times x is, so 0 times 4 is 0. 0 times negative 3 is a 0. So 0 times x is 0. So when it's missing, putting a 0 as a numerical coefficient makes the term 0. I got an x cubed, and I got an x, and I got a constant. But my x squared term is missing, so it's 2x cubed plus 0x squared minus x plus 1. So the x is missing, or sorry, the x squared is missing. So when I go start at the top at 3 and go down, that was missing, put a 0x squared, as you can see. So now this polynomial is in descending order with the missing term filled in. This one starts at x to the 4th is the highest, okay. Notice I have no x cubed, so that's plus a 0x cubed. I have an x squared, okay. After x squared is an x, but I have no x, so that's a 0x. And a minus 7, the constant goes on the right. So the missing terms are x cubed and x. I put a 0 with them, so now I have my right descending order. And that's what I have up here is going to be good for down here. Because if I have missing terms, I fill them in with a 0. Here we go. I had x plus 1 divided into descending order, okay. This is in descending order, but notice I got an x squared, but I have no x, so it's a 0x plus 2. I have to fill in this 0x in this division, or I'm going to be in trouble. I'm working it out. Filling it in. Now x into x squared gives me an x. X times x is x squared. X times 1 is 1x or x. I'm going to subtract. That plus becomes a minus, and that plus becomes a minus. So the positive 1, negative 1 cancels out. That's 0, so that's a negative 1. Understood. Just a negative x is a negative 1x. Bring down your 2. X into negative x is negative 1. Multiply back. Negative 1 times x, negative x. Negative 1 times positive 1 is negative 1. Draw a line. And I change my signs. That negative becomes a positive. And that negative becomes a positive. That's a plus there. So, negative 1 plus 1, they cancel out. Plus 2 plus 1, that's a plus 3. Remember, that was a negative, so that's a plus right there. And the quotient is at the top, which is x minus 1, and the remainder is at the bottom, which is 3. B, I have descending order again. So we're going to write this one down, put the x first and the 2 second, descending order. When I'm going to write this one down, the x squared goes first, the negative 6 goes second, and the constant term is not there, so let's fill in a 0 for the constant term, just to be consistent. Write it down. Square x and a constant. X into x squared goes x, multiply back, x squared, multiply, and I get a negative 2. Draw a line. The plus becomes a minus, and the minus becomes a plus because I'm adding on the opposite. Negative 1 and negative 1 cancels out. Negative 6 plus 2 is 4. Bring down your 0. You don't have to, but since I got it there, it keeps everything nice and neat. X into 4x gives me a plus 4. Notice when I got the 0 there, which is the constant term, then this 4 goes above the 0. So x times plus 4 is plus 4x, and negative 2 times 4 is negative 8. So this 4 is multiplied by both of these. Done. This plus becomes a minus, and this minus becomes a plus. So that's plus 4 minus 4 cancels out, and that's 0. That's a plus 8, so 8 is your remainder. So the quotient is x plus 4, and the remainder is at the bottom, which is 8. C. You can see there's lots of practice here. Descending order. The negative 2x goes first, and the negative 3 comes after. And I got an 8x cubed, negative 8x. I got a 10x plus 10x, and I have a 0 constant. So the x squared goes first. Notice when I move these, that's a negative, still stays. I'm just moving around and not switching signs. Negative 2x into negative 8x squared is a 4x. 4x times negative 2x is negative 8x squared. 4x times negative 3 is negative 12. Change negative to a positive, and change my negative to a positive because I'm adding on the opposite. Negative 8 plus 8 cancels out. Negative 10 plus 12 is 22. Bring down to 0. And negative 2 into 11 is, negative 2 into 22 is negative 11. Multiply back. Negative 11 times negative 2x, 22x. Negative 11 times negative 3 is a plus 33. Draw a line, subtract. Positive becomes a negative, and the positive becomes a negative. So 22, and that's a 22 there. When I multiply, I never put 2 in, so they're the same, they cancel. And there's 0, subtract 33, so that's negative 33. So my quotient, Q, is 4x minus 11. My remainders is R, which is a negative 33. And we have the last one here, descending order. Well, I got x squared divided by this bracket. So that means I have an x minus 3 divided into x squared. You're going to say, well, where's the rest of it? Well, remember, descending order, that's an x squared, so there's a 0x and there's a 0 constant. So we fill these in by putting the zeros in, everything goes a little bit better. So x into x squared goes x. The x goes above the x term. So x times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. Draw a line, subtract. Plus becomes a minus. The minus becomes a plus. So they cancel out. Plus 1 minus 1 is 0. And 0 add on 3 is a 3x. Bring down to 0. X into 3x goes plus 3. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. Draw a line. This plus becomes a minus. The minus becomes a plus. Circle them. Plus 3 minus 3 cancels out. And 0, that's a plus 9, so it's a 9. So your quotient is x plus 3. Remainder is on the bottom, 9. So that brings us to the end of dividing a trinomial by a binomial. Follow the pattern, keep working, keep thinking, keep working them out, and you'll be okay. Practice makes perfect, remember? And a lot of students have trouble with division, so I took my time to make sure I explained how this division is done. And remember, doing one step at a time like I'm doing, changing your signs on the subtraction. When you change your sign and put them in a circle, then you know that you can go back and follow to see if you got it done right. Because you can always make an error. It's easy to make an error in math. So easy. Anyway, if you like my video, click on the like button. If you're not a subscriber, you can subscribe to my channel and click on the notification bell because there's more videos coming. And if you're a subscriber, then write a comment on my video if you wish. And visit my math website, www.mathfullyexplained.com. And there you get information in 3 different sections. Section on me has my degrees and teaching experience. The section on videos tells you about the teaching strategies that I employ to help you learn your math. I always have tricks and little ways of helping you learn the math. And the section on content, you have the units, you have the number of videos on each of the units that I'm going to have online. And the black font has the units that are already uploaded to my YouTube channel. And the red font is the videos that I'm going to do in the near future. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.